You didn't have to kill her.
She's about to take your head off. There's no coming back from that one.
Did someone switch on Highlander while I wasn't looking? Dear Mr. Kring, as one of many people who adored the first season of Heroes as something genuinely exciting on television, I'm also one of the many who watched Season 2 with tremendous dismay. I've also read the Entertainment Weekly piece in which you addressed what you saw as the fans' problems with the new season, and frankly, I'm concerned. You talk about slow pacing, raising the stakes, and romance not being a good fit for the show, but you don't seem to understand why Heroes' foray into the past to try to save a waitress in Season 1, which was slow, relatively low-stake, and romantic, worked very well. Daring to assume that you are still receptive to criticism, I would like to make a few points of my own. Point number 1. New characters are not intrinsically interesting, no matter how cool or powerful or potentially devastating their powers may be. There isn't a single character from Season 1 that I wouldn't trade for 2 of Maya, which brings in another point. Point number 2. Killing off characters can be dramatic, meaningful, tragic, critical, or it can just be wasteful and unimaginative, suggesting more of desperation or a lack of imagination than careful planning and pathos. When Gabriel died in Season 1, it worked on many levels. We had the horror that a ruthless and terrifying villain had gained what seemed to be a crucial power. We had the tragedy that a drug addict lost his life just when he seemed to be turning that life around. We had fear that the good guys had lost an important factor in preventing an oncoming doom. We even had the satisfaction that, through his comic, even post-mortem, Gabriel had sown the seeds of Sylar's destruction. Compare that to the death of Maya's brother. It wasn't especially surprising, and we hadn't been given a whole lot of reason to care. The brother was little more than a cipher to the show's emotional basket case. With Nikki's death, we went from meaningless to questionable. As an interesting character who we did care about, and who still had loose ends and open questions, was killed off by an arbitrary happening in a peripheral plot thread. Her earlier involvement in the season suggested little, as much as that the script didn't know what to do with her. Nikki's husband's death was even more arbitrary, especially given an unwillingness to bring Nikki's conflicting feelings about her powers to a satisfactory conclusion, since that conflict was the only credible dramatic reason for the earlier death in the first place. Point number 3. Character is the key to plot, not the other way around. When Nathan Petrelli had to choose between political ambitions and loyalty to his estranged brother, that choice came out of a character who had depth. We had seen the relationships with his wife, brother, and mother, his affection for his family, his self-doubt about his own past moral failings, his questions about his powers and the effect they had on his life. We had to choose between being a man of political power or a brother and a hero. We understood why that choice was difficult, and even how Claire's actions might have inspired him. When he made his decision, it resounded with the viewers. When Suresh changed sides, when his destroying the Ashanti virus had no ramifications, when he shot Noah Bennett, which was also remarkably devoid of effect, these were not decisions that arose out of character, but decisions that arose out of plot necessity, and the plot that required those decisions was neither terribly interesting nor well strung together, making the characters' contrived decisions all the more frustrating to witness. Really, what single thing did Suresh observe to make him jerk about so dramatically? And Adam/Kensei, who started with promise, quickly became one more cliché, a megalomaniacal villain who wants to purge the world. His elimination of the other members of the conspiracy quickly forgotten, we were told to believe his cleverness and charm while hardly seeing the faintest example of either quality in action. Claire went from a lonely, self-destructive girl who found resolve and stood up to fear in a time of crisis, to a whiny, petulant, self-indulgent brat who flaunted her powers stupidly and became romantically involved with a character whose evident character traits could most easily be described as sociopathic. And then there's Maya, a character I've described to family and friends as the world's most dangerous crybaby. When there's investment in the characters, we're enthralled by their decisions, right or wrong. When characters can be described in 3 words and a power, they take on the worst qualities of what make the term comic book derogatory: paper-thin, contrived, interchangeable. Point number 4. Consider people's powers, their consequences, their limits, and their ramifications, very carefully. The idea that a regenerative character's blood can heal even dire and near-mortal injuries has put a standing deus ex machina over every subsequent episode that is going to make every character's death questionable as to its finality, and every final death seem that much more unnecessarily arbitrary. That Adam understood that his decapitation was an injury he wouldn't recover from begs two obvious questions. Why hadn't the other members of his conspiracy killed him thus? And how could he possibly know such a thing? You might also consider things like that Season 1 had Micah touching machines to affect them, while Season 2 inexplicably has him changing traffic lights at a distance, and recognize that Hero and Peter, who had worked together in the past, have no conceivable reason to ever come to blows. They literally have all the time in the world to discuss things, and Hero can show Peter that Kensei previously attempted to acquire the virus for malevolent purposes, as he had just witnessed. It's also been suggested that preventing the timeline in which the Ashanti virus is loosed somehow rescues a character trapped in that timeline, but to us that conclusion is far from intuitive, that the characters should know such a thing with any certainty, even less. Powers need consistency and limitations, otherwise viewers understand the possibility that every obstacle will be overcome by contrivance. If there's one thing that's less enjoyable than watching gods fight, it's watching stupid gods fight. People who never consider what their powers could actually do. The appeal of these characters is that they're recognizable people who we can identify with, who have powers. When they have those powers and the powers aren't consistent, and the characters use them foolishly or pointlessly, we are discouraged on several levels from making that identification. Point number 5. Foreshadowing is a tricky business. The first season gave us the possibility of a nuclear explosion in New York, and heightened the tension by revealing what that explosion would mean to the world. But what really made things effective was knowing what could happen, but not knowing how it would happen, as the various heroes sought out clues and played out their destinies. Watching the puzzle fall into place was incredibly satisfying. Season 2 eventually gave us a plague that killed 96% of the population, but didn't give us much reason to care. It might seem that such an event carries its own weight, but you'd be surprised. 2 of the only 3 characters we witness in this alternate timeline go there of their own accord for rather laughable reasons. Reasons, again, that seem to stem out of plot necessity, in this case revealing the threat of the plague, more than motivation or logical conclusion. Beyond that, the death of 96% of the population is almost too big a bugbear. We just can't imagine the writer allowing it to happen, whereas the destruction of a single city seems all too real. And then there's Gabriel's second set of paintings, which, frankly, was a mistake. Far from foreshadowing, the paintings became motivations for characters to hit the appropriate plot points on the script outline. Things that would happen simply because, well, again, the script demanded that they happen. Motivation and logic and narrative flow be damned. If Gabriel turns out to have done a third set of paintings, I'm gone. Mr. Kring, I'm waiting for a third season of Heroes that can make me excited to watch the series again. I know you can do it. Regards, Sterling.